The house was unusually quiet that morning, even for a Tuesday. A soft fog had covered everything during the night, muffling the sound of the seagulls and road traffic. I had just settled into my armchair by the window, with its worn arms and the faint mark of Richard's favorite book still in the cushion next to me, when the phone rang. The number didn't ring a bell. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something a little tug in the chest, like a whisper I couldn't ignore, made me pick up. "Mrs. Johnson?" the voice on the other end asked softly. "I hope I'm not bothering you." There was a pause. I didn't recognize the voice, but the way it said my name made me straighten up. "I'm Elliot Baxter, owner of Baxter & Sons jewelry store in Puerto Escondido. I'm calling because something arrived at my workshop yesterday, a gold necklace engraved with the initials EJ." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My fingers clenched the phone. "They said it came from your son and daughter-in-law," he continued. "But when I checked it to fix the brooch, I found something unusual inside. I think you should see it yourself." I stood up without realizing it, the pain in my knees forgotten. "Are you sure it's my necklace?" My voice came out too low. I cleared my throat. "It can't be." The initials were clear. "The chain is unique, of ancient craftsmanship. I didn't mean to alarm you, but I thought you had a right to know." The call ended with his polite, measured tone, but I froze by the window long after the line was cut. The necklace, my necklace, the one my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary, was the only thing that truly remained of him when he was gone. I turned toward the bedroom, my chest tight. The top drawer of the dresser. That's where I'd put it the last time, the night after the funeral. I crossed the room, my hands shaking, and opened it. It was empty. The drawer gaped like a wound. I ran my fingers through the bare wood, as if the necklace could reappear just by touching it. But it wasn't there, completely gone. Neither chain nor brooch, not even the slightest trace of gold dust it used to leave when I kept it every night. I stayed there a long time, stunned by the absence. That necklace had never left the house, not in decades. Richard had put it around my neck the night he gave it to me, our 20th anniversary, a quiet dinner at home with candles and music he knew I loved. He took my hand across the table and said, "It's not just gold." I laughed, moved by the sentiment and the way his eyes softened when he said it. I never thought a jewel could mean so much until he was gone. It became the last bond with him, the last thing I felt was ours. I leaned against the dresser, dizzy. The timeline fit too tightly for comfort. A few weeks ago, Lauren had come uninvited, offering to help me sort things out. The next day, Nathan appeared, asking casual questions about my documents and whether I'd lost something lately. I hadn't thought much of it then. Their hands were silent, calculated. I returned to the living room, the floorboards creaking under my feet. On the ledge, the photo of Richard smiled with that youthful stubbornness I loved and hated in equal parts. I looked at it, wishing he would speak. Of course he didn't, but Elliot Baxter did. I put on my coat and took my bag. The sky outside was beginning to clear. The fog dissolved into a pale glow between the trees, and I could barely make out the port address of the jewelry store. The road wasn't long, but I hadn't driven it alone in months. The necklace was gone. That was true. But if Elliot Baxter had found something inside, something he believed I needed to see, then I had to see it now. The bell over the door of the workshop rang softly as I entered, and for a moment I was surprised at how little the place had changed since the last time Richard and I were there. Same glass counters, same slight smell of silver polish and cedar wood. We had brought the necklace once before, years ago, just to adjust the clasp. Richard insisted on doing it himself, but I threatened to use adhesive tape. A man stood behind the counter, Elliot, I assumed, tall, well-dressed, with gentle eyes that didn't hesitate when they saw me. "Mrs. Johnson?" he asked. I nodded. "You said you had something of mine." He offered a tight but respectful smile and opened a small box in front of him. There was the necklace, my necklace. its chain coiled like a question mark, the pendant shining in the soft light. "I didn't harm it," he said quickly. "But when I opened the clasp to check the spring, I found this inside." He took out two objects from under the counter and placed them on a dark velvet cloth, a small brass key, longer than my pinky nail, and a piece of folded, aged photographic paper. I took the photo with trembling fingers. It was us, Richard and me, on our wedding day. The image was faint, but the joy wasn't. His hand was on my waist, my hair waved by the wind, and we laughed, not at anything in particular, just because we could. "Richard left something else," Elliot said in a low voice, taking out a sealed envelope from a drawer. My name was written on the front in his handwriting, the same one that filled out shopping lists and birthday cards. "He left it with me last year. He said that if someone other than you brought the necklace, I had to call you and give you this." I took it slowly, my breath short. The paper was thick, heavier than I expected. I didn't open it right away. I just held it, as if waiting for the moment to tell me what was next. Back in my car, I sat with the envelope in my lap for a good while before opening it. The edges were slightly worn, as if touched more than once. I ran my thumb over Richard's writing one last time. Then I carefully broke the seal. Inside, the letter was short, just one page, but each line seemed written with immense weight. "Emma, if you are reading this, it is because someone tried to take from you. Don't let them. This key opens the safe deposit box, parcel bell 427 at the Hidden Harbor Bank on Hidalgo Street. The staff will know what to do. Everything is in your name. No one else has access. I made sure of that. I'm sorry I'm not there with you, but I want you to know I saw it coming. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the signs. You've always trusted too much, even when they didn't deserve it. I love you. I always have. Take back what's yours." My fingers clenched the paper as tears fell. I had to read it twice to breathe again. He knew. I thought about the months after the funeral, when the house suddenly felt too full with Nathan and Lauren appearing so often. She began cleaning without asking, putting my things in boxes to save them. Nathan asked where I kept the deed to the house, if I had made a will. I thought they were looking out for me, worried I wasn't handling things well on my own. But maybe they weren't looking out for me. Maybe they were watching me. The key in my hand now felt heavier, not just because of its size, but what it meant. Richard hadn't left it to chance. He had hidden it where no one else would think to look, near me, but out of their reach. I looked toward the workshop. Elliot was behind the glass, his head bowed respectfully. I gave him a slight nod. Then I started the engine. The bank was just 10 minutes away, and I didn't want to lose my nerve. The bank was calm when I arrived. The lobby still smelled faintly of paper and floor polish. A young woman with impeccable braids and a patient smile led me to a small private room after checking my identification and taking the key. Her voice was polite but rehearsed, the kind reserved for those the world assumes are fragile. "This way, Mrs. Johnson. Take all the time you need." She placed the box on the table and left me alone. I needed both hands to lift the lid. The first thing I saw was a thick folder tied with a crimson ribbon. I untied it carefully, revealing neatly stacked documents. At the top was a letter in Richard's handwriting, but this time more trembling. "You gave everything to this family. Now take your life back. The account in your name is active. No one else has access. I deposited every month for years, not much each time, but enough to grow. You will also find the deed. It's yours alone. The house is waiting for you. I told no one, not even Nathan. And one more thing, the will, the real one, the one we wrote together before I got sick. They won't rewrite what we built." My chest swelled with an emotion I hadn't felt in months, something between grief and rage, but softer than both. I slowly took out the documents, absorbing each one. There was a savings account in my name with enough to support me for years. The deed to a small house by the sea in Playa del Carmen. I had never been there, but Richard mentioned it once when we were young. He said he dreamed of retiring there, reading on the porch while I gardened. And the will, dated and notarized, signed by both of us. It was all mine, exclusive property, no conditions. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. I kept it all. He had planned it. He had seen what I was too afraid to see, and now he had given me a choice. I folded the papers carefully, put them back in the envelope, and took my coat. Nathan arrived just after dinner, without warning, as if that were still acceptable. I heard the knock on the door before I saw the headlights outside. I didn't move immediately. I stayed by the window, watching him shift his weight from one foot to the other on the porch, hands stuffed into the pockets of his coat like a child caught stealing something small. When I opened the door, his expression softened into a concern too polished to be real. "Mom," he said, "you didn't answer the phone. Lauren and I were worried." I stepped aside. "Come in." His eyes slowly scanned the room, as if it might have changed. It hadn't. "You saw the car wasn't here before," he said. "Is everything all right?" I stared at him. "No, everything is not all right." He flinched slightly. "Is something wrong?" I pointed to the sofa but didn't sit. "Do you know where my necklace is, Nathan?" His face barely changed, just a blink, a pause too long. "What necklace?" "You know exactly which one." Lauren came in behind him then, breathless and with an exaggerated smile. "Emma, we didn't want to bother you. The chain was in a drawer, gathering dust. We thought maybe you wouldn't notice." "It wasn't yours to take." Lauren's smile tightened. "We needed funds," she said. "The business has been slower than expected. It's just temporary." I looked at her first, then at Nathan. "You never asked. Not once." "We didn't think you'd mind," he said, his voice lower. "You haven't used it in years." It wasn't just gold. My voice didn't rise, but it hit harder than a scream. "It was a promise from your father, and you sold it like a trinket at a market." They didn't say anything. Lauren sat down, suddenly solemn. Nathan looked away. "I got a call from the jeweler," I went on. "I went, and he gave me back what you sold. But what he gave me was more than the necklace." Nathan's eyes snapped back to me. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I turned and walked to the shelf. I took the envelope I had left there that afternoon and held it in my hand, not offering it, just letting it exist between us, like a line they hadn't expected me to draw. The bell rang shortly after noon, sharp and deliberate. I expected silence that day, perhaps the slight buzz of guilt, but instead, I opened the door and found a man in a dark gray suit holding a leather briefcase and an apologetic smile. "Mrs. Johnson?" he asked. "I'm Gregory Ingram, your son's lawyer." My mouth stayed still, but my hands tightened slightly at my sides. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson has expressed concern about your recent decisions. He asked me to organize a wellness assessment, just to make sure your affairs are in order." I stepped aside. "You'd better come in." He entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the room with the detached practice of a lawyer. I pointed to the armchair in front of the fireplace and went to the sideboard. From the top drawer, I took out an impeccable, organized folder. "These," I said, placing it in front of him, "are the documents related to my finances, my property, and my legal autonomy." He hesitated, then opened the folder. As he browsed the pages, bank statements, will, notarization, the deed to the house on the beach, his posture changed. By the time he reached the letter in Richard's handwriting, his tone softened to something close to respect. "I understand," he said finally. "These documents appear complete, valid, and recent." "They are," I said. "It's all in my name, everything in order." He looked at me then, seeing the woman in front of him for the first time instead of the one they had described to him. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," he said. "I will inform your son that no further action is required." I nodded once. Do it." He gathered his things and left without another word. I waited until the door closed before I sat down. A few minutes later, Nathan entered the driveway. He didn't knock right away. I heard the car door close, an uncertain pause on the steps, then the touch of his knuckles on the glass. When I opened the door, I didn't invite him in. "You thought I was old," I said calmly. "You forgot I was also prepared." He looked at me as if he didn't recognize who was in front of him, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to explain. The house on the beach was at the edge of a quiet path, surrounded by wind-worn fences and withered hydrangeas. It was smaller than I imagined, but that made it feel more like mine, a porch with just enough room for one rocking chair, windows open to the sea, a small garden that had gone wild but wasn't beyond saving. As I entered, the air smelled slightly of cedar and salt. The floorboards creaked under my shoes, and sunlight spilled across the wooden planks, as if it had been waiting for someone to come home. I walked through each room slowly. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a reading corner by the fireplace. On the shelf, there was a small hook right above where a nail once stood. I knew what would hang there. Richard always said he wanted to frame a photo from our wedding day, just one. He could never choose which. I spent the night there, and when morning came, I knew I wouldn't go back. I returned home once more, just to pack, not everything, just the essentials, some clothes, a couple of framed photos, my books, the small box of letters Richard had written to me over the years, and the necklace, of course. I put it around my neck before leaving. I didn't leave a forwarding address, just a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm not fleeing. I'm living. Emma." I didn't block Nathan's number. I thought letting the phone ring without answering would say more than silence. He texted me once, asking if I was safe. I didn't reply. He didn't ask where I'd gone. The day I closed the front door for the last time, I didn't cry. I turned the lock with steady hands, put the keys in an envelope, and slid them into the mailbox. By nightfall, I was back on the porch of the beach house, barefoot, watching the tide come in and out, as it had done long before any of us were here, and I was no longer waiting. It was almost a month before I saw him again. Nathan arrived unannounced, appearing just as the late tide retreated. He stayed at the edge of the path, as if unsure whether to knock or turn around. I opened the door before he could decide. He looked different, not just tired, but worn in a way beyond fatigue. "I didn't expect you to fight back," he said in a low voice. I didn't offer a smile. "You didn't expect me to matter." He nodded, looking at his shoes. "I was wrong." He didn't ask to come in, and I didn't invite him. We stood on the porch, the ocean behind us, both pretending the air wasn't thick with everything unsaid. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "Really? For everything?" I thought he meant it, but it wasn't enough. I crossed my arms. "Respect isn't a gift, Nathan. It's a choice, and you earn it." "I know." I waited. He didn't make excuses. He didn't defend Lauren or the business or the months of silent manipulation. He just stood there, owning it. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," he said, "but I'd like to start anew if you'll let me." I looked at my son, my traitor, my child, and said nothing, but I didn't close the door. Instead, I stepped aside, just enough. Most mornings, I wake to the sound of the tide touching the shore, a rhythm more constant than anything I've known. I wrap myself in my shawl, make a cup of tea, and sit on the porch with the necklace resting warm against my skin. The days feel different now, filled with noises that are just mine. I joined the local book club at the library 2 towns away. I planted roses by the fence. I started writing letters again, handwritten, truthful ones, addressed to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I don't hear from Nathan often. When I do, it's small gestures, a photo of the dog, a postcard from a business trip. I think he's learning to speak without taking up all the space in the room. I don't know if he'll ever be the child I raised, but that's no longer up to me. What's mine now is this silence, this garden, this porch, this version of myself that remembers how to live without apologies. Sometimes I reread Richard's letter, though I don't need to. I know it by heart. I think he'd like this place. I think he'd be proud I didn't break. The necklace shines under the sun as I lean back in the rocking chair. You didn't just steal a necklace, I whisper, though no one is listening. You tried to rewrite who I was, but now I'm the one holding the pen.